One of the most common questions that I get from business owners every single day is, what do I outsource and when do I do it? I think ultimately what we want to consider is that outsourcing is really challenging, especially for a single solopreneur or somebody who's been working kind of on their own as a freelancer. And we start to think, oh, maybe this thing has legs. Maybe we want to start to outsource things. Or maybe you have a team and you've been kind of involved in a Franken role, we like to call it, right? Our founders really get stuck in being the chief marketing officer, the chief sales person, the chief fulfillment officer, and the fractional financial person. And we start to get super burnt out as our company grows and we have more individual contributors stacked underneath of us. So when is it appropriate to start to get some of that stuff off of our plate? I have a fantastic coach. His name is Dan Martell. He released a book in early 2023 called Buy Back Your Time. And this concept is so fundamentally true about how to assess the founder's time that I feel like it's worth bringing up in this video, because ultimately I've let it guide a lot of the things that I do personally, and also how I've advised that my clients actually do this. So something fundamental about his framework is that he has an assessment loop that basically you do at a particular cadence to say, okay, what's on my task list? What's on my calendar? Does this bring me joy? Does it not? And if I were to offload this, what type of ROI could I get on my time? And how could I fill up my available time to basically ascend to the next level in my leadership and my ownership? I find that that last piece is the most difficult for my founders. Often we outsource something and then all of a sudden we think that it's going to just give us the available time to like go put our feet up and, you know, take a nice little relaxing break, which might be amazing for a short time. But what we need to understand is that we still have a really critical role as a founder. So how are we assessing what is happening with our time? How are we getting that off of our plate and making sure that we have a comfortable return on that time? And how are we filling up our time after the fact to make sure that we actually are more valuable to our company, right? Our company is able to get more for the time that we put in than whatever it is paying us. So one of the biggest things that I try to find inside of our calendars of our CEOs and our founders is, what would we actually pay less for in the open market, right? So if you're in a position where you're making 150K a year or 250K a year as the owner of the business or the CEO of the business, and we start to kind of break that down into your hourly rate, and you find yourself doing lots of project management or lots of email management, and you're like, oh gosh, I would actually pay somebody like 30, 40 bucks an hour to do this, then that means you're costing your company money. So at the end of the day, what you want to do is you want to get that off of your plate in a way that feels really systematic, and you can create lots of operational structure around that so that you can get the best results. And then with all the time that you've saved from email management, project management, any administrative tasks that you would have otherwise been able to save money on in the open market, you can now be able to reinvest that into perhaps prospecting some more, or creating more, fruitful partnerships, or interviewing on podcasts and getting your brand and your name out there. I think ultimately, again, we struggle as founders to fill our available time back up with revenue generating activities. I find that the best time to understand when we need to start to outsource is when we've been able to create the clarity in our schedule around how we're spending our time and whether or not that time is cheaper on the open available market, right? There are easy, simple ways to be able to outsource these days. You can post a job on Upwork, you can post things on LinkedIn and get contractors and folks into your business for a small price and for a contracted agreement to start to get your feet wet in this degree. So I think it's really helpful to consider that if you've never outsourced anything before, if you're a solopreneur or you're starting to kind of pull the curtain back on like managing your email or your inbox or any of those types of things, just start to consider that, one step in the right direction is just that, right? You're moving in the right direction, even if it's slow. So making sure that you can assess your time and really consider finding alternatives that are less costly to your organization and can allow you and free up your time to do some of the things that only you can do, especially if you're a thought leader or if you have some intellectual property inside of your business. You can and should be speaking about that as much as humanly possible. And unfortunately, an administrative assistant at most pace can't really fulfill on that for you. So we've answered a couple of things here. We've talked about what. So on your calendar, what tasks you need to perhaps outsource. I think targeting some things that are administrative in nature, and then when to outsource them. So when your calendar starts to get filled up with some of these tasks, and honestly, I think probably all of us can relate here, whenever you've had one of those really hectic weeks and you're like, whoa, why did this week feel so crazy? Why did we have 1,000 fires? Or why did it always just feel like we were digging ourselves out of an endless task list or to-do list? That is a wonderful indicator that you probably need to go through that assessment, that you probably need to consider what to get off of your plate, right? Because when we start to feel hectic in our business and things start to feel really reactive, we are not putting our best foot forward, and actually we're worth less to our organization because we aren't in a position to be actually contributing in the highest degree possible. So I think finding those times where we might feel like we are contributing, but it's not at our best clip. Or if we feel like we're constantly reacting and putting out a ton of fires, and you want to create some more predictability inside of the business, which is ultimately going to lead to way more success and way less headache and way more peace on the path toward actualizing our vision and our goals. But I think a lot of us struggle for too long. We say, oh, this is the nature of growing the business, or oh, this is just hustle. And unfortunately, that is true for certain seasons, but it's not true for all. It's not true for all seasons. And I think a lot of us think that it is required all the time to be suffering and be hustling and all that, when in reality, we can take some strategic rest to actually pull back from the business and consider, okay, what would need to be true in order for me to take some time off or direct my attention to this other thing? I did this when I wanted to write my book, The Sabbatical Method. It was amazing and I loved that process. But when I took it to my team, I remember they said, Allie, I don't know how you're going to find time to do that. And what I did personally was I just asked myself the question, well, if I need 90 minutes a day to write this book and do the marketing plan and write all the emails and build the toolkit and all the things that went into launching a wonderfully successful book, an amazing, amazing tool for business owners, what would need to be true, right? What would need to be true in my business, and what little thoughts in the back of my head would need to be quieted so that I could show up as my best self to write this book. And what we did was we just solved for the other side of the equation, right? So when sometimes can be on a feeling, right? You're like, oh my goodness, I am so overworked. Like this is just real and I do not understand why things are so hectic. Two, if you have a big project on your heart that you're thinking has just been shelved for too long, you're like, I have to get this out into the world. I would suggest organizing your thoughts around how you spend your time and what specifically to outsource. And then the third is, if at very least you do this at a monthly cadence, right? What's on deck for the month? How are you spending your time? What specific activities are you going to be doing to make sure that you're driving your goals forward that only you can be a contributor to? And how are you getting support externally from somebody else? Remember, if this is your first time bringing somebody into the business, make sure that you take your time. Make sure that you organize your thoughts. Make sure that you create a clear job description, and make sure that you create some of those resources that your team might need to be successful. I think it is so important to take that very first hire so intentionally so that you can lay a really comfortable foundation for future growth inside of your business. I hope that this was so helpful to you. And if you're enjoying the content today, I hope that you will subscribe to our channel so that you can stay up to date on the latest contributions to our Operations Simplified channel.